Recording cut. Hannah and I stood on the deck in the dark and counted the intervals, and then it simply ended. Not a fade, not a slowing, stopped between pulses, the same way the hum stopped at 47 Marginal Road when the node closed. I noted that parallel immediately. Hannah noted it before I did. We're still aboard. That's the first thing to document. We didn't leave. My objective tonight, this recording, this session, is to find what this vessel was built to do and whether the equipment to do it is still on board. The ROOK symbol plate on the lantern housing tells me Morwenna is part of the access system. The operational logs told me she maintained a station for 43 years. What they don't tell me is the mechanism, how an investigator goes from the surface to a node that sits 38 meters below the seabed in 50 meters of water. That's what I'm here to find. The mechanism. Hannah is forward, checking the anchor arrangements. I told her what I was looking for. She didn't argue about the division of work, which means she already had the same idea about the anchor, the lantern housing. I've been inside it for the past 20 minutes. It's a cylindrical space approximately 8 feet in diameter, the lantern mechanism itself taking up the center column, the lens assembly, the rotation gear, the fuel reservoir, all original to the 1928 construction. The Heritage Trust has maintained it in operational condition, which means the original fittings are intact, including the fittings I wouldn't have looked at twice an hour ago. There is a panel set into the base of the lantern column, low facing aft, partially obscured by a bracket for the rotation gear. Steel plate, 4 bolts, a handle flush with the surface. The kind of panel that exists on working machinery for access to components that need periodic servicing. I've seen panels like this on every piece of industrial equipment I've ever examined. What I haven't seen before is the stamp on the handle, ROOK. Not engraved, stamped into the steel, the same depth and technique as the symbol plate on the exterior. This was done at manufacture. Whoever built this vessel knew what this panel was for before the ship left the yard. I undid the bolts. They turned without corrosion, serviced recently, or the Heritage Trust maintains the interior fittings as carefully as the exterior. The panel came free. Behind it, a binder, cloth-covered, dark green, the same shade as O'Connor's Project Chronos journal. I'm noting that correspondence without drawing a conclusion from it. The cloth cover has no title on the front. On the spine, in gilt lettering that is held better than O'Connor's journal, WRAITH. Below that, smaller, restricted appendix. I'm reading it now. I'm going to document what it contains in the order I find it, not reorganized, not summarized. The order is evidence. The binder. First page, a single typed line centered, Station WRAITH, Observation and Access Protocol. Below it, a classification marking I don't recognize, not Admiralty standard, not any government format I know, a different system entirely. The kind of classification that exists inside an organization that doesn't appear in official records. Second page, a diagram. I need to describe this carefully. The diagram shows a vessel in cross-section viewed from the side. The hull, the superstructure, the lantern housing at the top. Extending from the base of the hull, directly below the lantern column, a line, vertical, descending from the hull center line to a point below, where the line meets a rectangular shape drawn with heavier strokes. The rectangular shape is labeled T6, the same designation as the survey transect where the buried structure was found in 1967. The line between the hull and the structure is labeled access cable, minimum 90 mm, 90 meters, 50 meters of water, 38 meters to the structure below the seabed. The math is almost exact, with margin for anchoring variation. This vessel was designed with a cable long enough to reach the buried structure at ROOK. Third page, positioning specifications. This is where I'm spending time, reading slowly, because the language is precise and I don't want to misread it. The vessel must be anchored at the exact coordinate, the same one on the closure document, 51.4 Guingmu, not near it, not approximately above it. The anchoring specification gives a tolerance of plus or minus 15 meters, with a note that reads, "Deviation beyond tolerance will not register." The same language as the four-step sequence at 47 Marginal Road. The archive responds to precision, not approximation. The lantern bearing must align with the ROOK symbol plate. I read this twice because I thought I'd misread it. The lantern has to be oriented, the plate on the housing facing the coordinate directly. Morwenna wasn't just built to face ROOK from the dock. The lantern has to be actively aimed at the coordinate during access. The plate is a targeting instrument. 2 observers must be on deck, maintaining line of sight with each other for the duration of descent. I stopped at that line and held the binder still for a moment. Line of sight. 2 investigators. Surface platform geometry. The access condition on the closure document. 2 investigators present, line of sight maintained, isn't about the descent itself. It's about the surface team. 1 person descends, 1 person stays on deck. They maintain visual contact. That's the condition. That's what line of sight means at a submerged node. Not 2 people going down. 1 going down, 1 staying up, both visible to each other for as long as the cable runs. I'm documenting this now because Hannah needs to know it, and I want it recorded before I find her. 4th page, the descent protocol. I'm going to read this section verbatim into the recording because it's short enough and precise enough that paraphrasing would risk losing something. Descent protocol, station WRAITH. Step 1. Anchor vessel at specified coordinate. Confirm bearing alignment using lantern plate. Step 2. Both observers confirmed on deck, line of sight established. Step 3. Deploy access cable via foredeck winch. Do not lower faster than 2 meters per minute. Step 4. Surface observer maintains position and line of sight for full duration. Step 5. Descent observer follows cable hand over hand. No independent propulsion. The cable is the path. Note: do not initiate descent if signal interval is less than 11 seconds. The interval marks the window. If interval shortens below 11 seconds, abort and surface immediately. That last note, I need to stay with that. The signal we've been hearing, the 11-second pulse from below the seabed, isn't ambient. It isn't just evidence that something is down there. It's a clock. The interval marks the window. 11 seconds means the window is open. If it shortens, something has changed below and the approach is no longer viable. It shortened once tonight, 4 minutes after the last recording cut, and then it stopped. I don't know if stop means the window closed or the window completed its cycle. The protocol doesn't address cessation, only shortening. I need to find Hannah. I'm on deck now. The harbor is quiet in the way that working harbors are quiet at 2 in the morning. Machinery noise from the far end of the dock, a light on the water near the main channel, nothing close to us. Hannah is at the foredeck. I can see her crouched near the anchor windlass housing. She looked up when I came through the hatch and I held up the binder. She stood. I gave her the summary on the way forward. Positioning requirement. Bearing alignment. 2 on deck, 1 descends. Cable protocol. The note about the interval. She listened without interrupting, which is how she listens when the information is changing her understanding of something she'd already partially worked out. When I finished, she said, "The winch." I said, "What about it?" She pointed at the foredeck windlass. Standard anchor arrangement, heavy steel, original to the vessel. "That's the anchor winch. The protocol says foredeck winch, separate system." I looked where she was pointing. Forward of the main windlass, mounted closer to the bow, there is a second fitting on the deck. A base plate bolted through the deck with 4 bolt holes in the configuration for mounting a winch drum. The bolts are still there. The winch drum is not. She said, "It's been removed." I crouched and looked at the mounting plate. The bolt holes are clean, no corrosion in the threads, which means the bolts were removed deliberately and the holes were covered or treated at the time of removal. This wasn't neglect. Someone took the winch off this vessel when it was decommissioned, and the removal was careful. I asked her when the vessel came to this dock. She said she'd seen a notice board on the way in. The trust acquired Morwenna in 1994, and she's been at this berth since. Same year as the unprocessed archive box with the catalog cards. I filed that. 23 years between decommissioning in 1974 and heritage acquisition in 1994. 23 years when the vessel's whereabouts are unaccounted for in the material we have. The winch was removed during that period, or at acquisition, or at some point since. We don't know. What we know is that the cable mechanism on this vessel is gone, and we have somewhere between 3 hours and 3 hours and 10 minutes left in the entry window, and Morwenna is 12 kilometers from the ROOK coordinate, and she hasn't moved under her own power since 1974. Hannah sat down on the deck beside the mounting plate. Not distressed, processing. I've learned to recognize the difference. After a moment, she said, "The cable's still here." I looked at her. She said, "Check the lantern base compartment again, behind where the binder was." I went back down. She was right. Behind the space where the binder sat, further into the compartment than I reached the first time, there is a coil of cable. Steel wire wrapped on a spool. The spool mounted to the compartment wall on a bracket. The cable is heavy. I tried to lift the spool and it didn't move freely, more than I can estimate without equipment. The cable itself is dark, slightly oiled, no visible corrosion. Someone has maintained this. The end of the cable nearest the compartment opening is fitted with a steel ring, a connection point, the kind that attaches to a winch drum or a pulley. The ring is clean. The connection geometry is standard. Beside the spool, mounted to the same bracket, a pulley block. Heavy steel, single sheave, rated for loads I can't read in this light. And below the pulley, a locking pin through a bracket hole, something that would allow the pulley to be positioned over an opening in the deck if the deck had an opening. I'm looking at the base of the lantern column now. There is a hatch in the deck of the lantern housing, directly below the column. Flush, no handle, a recessed lip. I hadn't noticed it because I was looking at the panel, not the floor. The cable would run from this compartment, through the pulley, down through this hatch, and into the water below the hull. Without the powered winch drum, you'd need to manage the cable by hand, or use the anchor windlass if the geometry worked. I need Hannah to look at this. I'm coming back up. Hannah is in the lantern housing now. I'm on deck with the binder, rereading the positioning specifications in the dock light coming off the harbor. The anchor specification is the piece I can't resolve from here. We're 12 kilometers from the coordinate. Morwenna needs to be at 51.4 degrees, 1.2 degrees ease. The vessel hasn't moved in 50 years. The entry window is, under 3 hours now. Hannah called up from below. She said, "The anchor windlass works." I didn't understand immediately. She came up through the lantern housing hatch onto the deck and said it again. She said the anchor windlass motor is operational. She'd found the power connection to the dock's shore power, and the windlass drew current when she tested it. She said, "If we can get her off the berth, the anchor windlass can run the cable. The geometry's close enough. It's not what the pulley's designed for, but it'll hold the load." I looked at her for a moment, and then I said, "We can't move this ship." She said, "We can't not move this ship." She's right. I know she's right. The window is closing, and the coordinate is 12 kilometers northeast, and the cable is here, and the protocol is in my hands, and the system has been waiting at this berth for 23 years since someone left the catalog cards in an unprocessed box that we found 3 weeks ago. This was never a museum. Hannah went forward to look at the mooring lines. I'm staying here with the binder and the recording, documenting this before the next part happens, because the next part is going to require both of us, and I don't know when I'll be able to record again. One more thing from the binder that I haven't documented yet. Tucked into the back cover, a sealed metal cylinder, small, the kind used for watertight document storage. The cap is screwed on rather than latched. Hannah saw it before I finished reading the protocol section, and she said she wanted to open it after we understood the positioning requirement. She knows something about what might be inside. She hasn't said what. I haven't asked yet because the window is running and there wasn't time. The cylinder is on the deck beside me now. I'm picking it up. The signal, the 11-second pulse, it's back. Starting again from below the harbor floor, the same interval, the same direction. It started the moment I put my hand on the cylinder. I'm unscrewing the cap,